Welcome back to Huawei Routing and Switching Elite Training. Today topic we are going to discuss on STP Spanning Tree Protocol. Let's start our part 6.
Okay, so here I have my topology. Alright, so I have switch 1, switch 2 and switch 3 here, and finally I have switch 4. So you can see that switch 2 connecting to my client. So let me bring up the CLI. So this is the first switch, switch 1. I'm going to change this to RSTP as was required by the question, STP mode RSTP, and I'm going to do it on 1, 2 and 3. Okay, that's on the second one. Now switch number 4, this one we are going to use just the ordinary STP. Right, so this is being done, and remember that we are going to make the switch 1 as a primary, and we are going to make the switch 3 as a secondary route. Alright, so that will be the command on STP route primary. That's on switch number 1, and I go to switch number 3. That will be STP route secondary. Okay, so let's double check. On switch number 1, when we do a display STP brief, you can see this designated, and when I do display STP, you can see that that's my route. Okay, similar with my bridge ID. Okay, and when I go into switch number 3, display STP, so my route, that's my switch number 1, and you can see that the priority changed from 32768 to become 4096. And if let's say we never change anything, if I go to switch number 2, you can see that that is the default 32768. And if we go into switch number 4, alright, so we should have a ordinary STP mode. Alright, so here we have ordinary STP, and we only have one interfaces over here. Alright, which is forwarding. So we have done the mode as well as the primary and the secondary. Now the question also asks for the cost of all the ports supposed to be 10. Alright, so this one is easy, but we do have a few ports that we need to configure. So on switch number 1, we just go to the Ethernet 001 and we just do a cost of 10. Okay, so since we have repetitive command, we are going to do it on copy and paste. Okay, so that is on the second one, second port. Now switch number 2, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 ports here. First one, third one, fifth one. Okay, the fifth and the sixth. Okay, and we have here on the switch number 3, so we have 1, 2, 3 and 4. Alright, so we have 4 ports here on switch number 3. Okay, STP cost of 10. Then I have number 3. Then I have number 4. Then I have number 7. Alright, so that's done. And finally, on switch number 4, I only have one interface, which is 004, and I just do a cost of 10. Alright, so that is another requirement to set the cost of 10. Now the requirement on the switch number 3, we are going to configure that is an H port, and we also want to configure the BPDU filter. Alright, and we also want to make sure that when they detect there is a BPDU that is being sent, we have to put it into the error mode. Alright, so how can we do that? So let's go to the switch number 3. Okay, so firstly, let's go into the Ethernet 007. Alright, that's where it connects to the PC. Now we are going to configure this as the H port. Okay, H port enable. Okay, right, and we have to do some filtering. STP BPDU filter enable. Now you can only do filter, so which means that even though there is a BPDU that's sent to you, you are going to block it, but you are not going to put into the error mode. And for you to go into the error mode, let me show you the configuration. And for you to go to the error mode, you have to do a BPDU protection, and that is under your system view. So let me go into the STP BPDU protection. So this command, STP BPDU protection, will make the switch port that having the BPDU filter enable to block it. Alright, so these are the two commands. And the last command over here, that's the require to make sure that the root is being protected. Alright, that we are going to configure on Ethernet 004. Okay, so if we can go back to switch number 3, interface E004, we are going to do a STP root protection. Here we have it. So if we are going to do a display STP interface E003, okay, so E003 here, nothing much. Okay, so you can see that that's my secondary, but I would like to see the 004. Okay, so as you can see that our BPDU protection has been enabled, and if we go down here, the protection type, you can see that is the root protection. So that actually shows us that we have configured the root protection, and currently the mode here is running on an STP. If you still remember, they need it to be backward compatible. So if let's say this one has been removed, which is switch number 4 removed, then we should able to revert back. Okay, we should able to revert back into the RSTP. Okay, so that's it for all the configuration. Just to recap, on the switch number 3, alright, so we have configured on RSTP. This is a secondary root. We have enabled the BPDU protection just to make sure that when we receive a BPDU from the interface that has enabled the BPDU filter, it will go into the error. Okay, then if we look into the port, all the port has been configured with the cause, and on the number 4, port number 4, we have configured the root protection, and on the port number 7, we have configured H port as well as the BPDU filter. Okay, so that is on the configuration of RSTP. Alright, so this will be our last lab on how to configure the multi-spanning tree. Okay, multiple spanning tree. So again, we have a company A to deploy MSTP. So here we have a few requirements. The first requirement is to create VLAN 2 and VLAN 3 on all devices and configure port as a trunk port. Alright, so that one should be quite easy. And we have to allow VLAN 1, 2, and 3 to pass through. So alright, so we are going to configure the port trunk, allow pass VLAN 1, 2, and 3. Now this is the part that is which is most relevant to our MST. Here we are going to configure the region name. The region name we are going to use HW, and we are going to configure 2 instances. The instance number 2, VLAN 2, and instance number 3, VLAN 3. So we have 2 instances that we create, and by default we should have the MSTI 0, which is the IST. Then we are going to configure S1 and S3 as the root bridge. So for the instance number 2, you are the root. Okay, switch 1 will become the root. And for the MST number 3, switch number 3 is the root. Okay, and we also need to set the cost on the instance number 2 to 10, and you notice that it's only instance number 2. They never mention anything on instance number 3. And we also have to configure or deploy loop protection on switch 4. Okay, so these are some of the requirements, should not be too difficult. So just remember that we have to configure the VLAN trunk, then we have to configure the region, and all this MSTP configuration we are going to configure on all the switches. Now in this example, we only configure one single region, so we don't have any multi-region, so we don't have to worry about the CIST. Okay, and we just have to configure the cost and the loop protection. That's about it. So this will be the requirement. So let me switch to the lab. Here I have the ENSP with the topology on 4 switches. On the left I have switch 1 and switch 2, and on the right I have switch 3 and switch 4. And you can see that they are all connected as a mesh topology. So each of these I have 3 interfaces, 1, 2, 3 here. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, which is using Ethernet. Right. So let's just configure our switch. The first thing that we are going to look into is that when we do a display STP, by default we already run on MSTP. And when we do a display STP brief, you notice that we already have our internal spanning tree running, which is the 0. Okay. Right, so according to the question requirement is that first we have to configure the VLAN 2 and 3, and then we have to trunk to allow the VLAN 1, 2, and 3 to pass through. So nothing to do with STP, but this is the requirement. So we do a VLAN bash 2, 3. Okay, so over here I just do a copy and paste. Alright, there you go. So next we are going to configure the trunk port. Okay, so let's go back to switch number 1. Now we are going to configure all this port 1, 2, and 3 to become a trunk port. Okay, so we are going to use a port group. Okay, so let's do a port group 1. The group member here we have Ethernet 001 to Ethernet 003. So first we are going to do a port link type trunk, then port trunk allow pass VLAN 1, 2, and 3. Okay, that's a default. And we also remember that all the instance number 2, the cost must be 10. So we are going to do a STP instance 2, the cost is 10. Alright, so what we need to do is just configure these 3 inside here. Let's do a display current and have a look. So we have a trunk port. Alright, so we have the VLAN, because VLAN 1 is by default, so we have 2 to 3, and we also have the instance number 2 with a cost of 10. So what we need to do is just to replicate this to switch number 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so all this configuration will be exactly identical. So first I'm just do a copy and paste here. So I do it on here. Okay, then port link type trunk, port trunk allow pass VLAN 1, 2, and 3, and we have the STP instance 2, the cost is 10. Alright, so that is on switch 2. And we have to do STP instance number 2, the cost is 10. and the last one here. Alright, so there you have it. On all the switches we have configured based on the requirement that's on the port. We have to configure as a trunk, the cost as 10 for instance 2, and the VLAN that pass through is VLAN 2 to 3. Now next we come to a very critical configuration, how we can configure the MSTP. Now for us to configure MSTP, first we have to go into the STP region configuration. Okay, so remember the question asked for the region name. In your exam the region name will be given to you, so please follow it. So my region name is HW. Now sometimes the question do ask you to put in the revision number. Alright, and all the switches within the same region must use the same revision number, and since this question doesn't ask for a revision number, okay, which is the level, so we can just safely ignore it. And now we are going to configure the instance. So instance 2 is VLAN number 2, and instance 3 we have VLAN number 3. Okay, and very important, you have to do an active region configuration. Now if you never do this active region configuration, the MSTP will not take place. So let's do a display this. So this is a configuration on the STP region. So I have instance number 2. Okay, so I need to have instance number 3 that having a VLAN 3, and I have to undo, sorry, I have to the active region configuration. Okay, so as you can see that just now I never active region configuration, it never take place, so I need to amend it. So I say that undo instance 2 VLAN 1. Okay, right, then I have to do instance 2 VLAN 2. There you have it. So this is the configuration for switch number 1. So practically what we need to do is just to do a copy and paste to all the remaining switches. Okay, sorry, so I need to go out from here, so I just need to do from here. Okay, that's one. Just to recap, okay, to make sure that everything is alright, so I go back to system view, STP region configuration, the name, the instance, as well as to activate it, and finally we have switch number 4. Okay, there you have it. Alright, so now we are going to do a display STP region configuration. Now as you can see from here, we have the instance 0, that's the default IST. So we have MSTI2 mapped with VLAN 2, and the instance number 3 mapped to VLAN number 3. Alright, so if you still remember the question here asking that switch number 1, alright, so we are going to configure that to be the root primary. Okay, and switch number 3, we are going to configure that as a root primary for the instance number 3. Alright, so for us to do that is pretty simple. So firstly, we just go to the STP instance. So we have number 2, this will become the root primary. Okay, then we are going to do an STP instance number 3. We are going to do it as a root secondary. Okay, so we are going to do the reverse on switch number 3. So on switch number 3, STP instance number 3 is our root primary, and STP instance number 2, this will become the root secondary. Okay, so when we go back into switch number 1 and we do a display STP brief, Now you can see that the switch number 2 is the root. Okay, and if I go to switch number 3, display STP brief, now you can see that you are the root, and you can verify by display STP. Okay, instant display STP instance number 3. There you have it. Alright, so if you look into this instance, you can see that you are the root, because you can see your priority is 0 and you are the primary root for instance number 3, but you are not the root for instance number 2. Okay, so you are not, but you are the secondary root only, as you can see that your priority is 4096. Alright, so then what happened to the switch number 2 and switch number 4 then? So for switch number 2 and switch number 4, we can change the priority to different priority. So for example, in switch number 2, as you can see from here, display STP brief, you can see that number 2 here is an alternate port. Practically, we do not need to do anything over here. But assuming that switch number 2 here, you want it to become the third priority. Okay, and switch number, for instance, number 2, and here we want it to become the third root if let's say the primary and secondary fail. And for us to do that, we can actually just configure the priority. So let's have a look here. So if I go back into switch number 2, we can say that STP instance number 2, the priority over here is 8192. Okay, and STP instance number 3, the priority will be the lowest, let's say 61440. Alright, so there you go. We have our configuration here to make sure that the switch number 2 having the third priority. Okay, so if we go into the switch number 4, we can just do the reverse. STP instance number 2, the priority here is 61440, and STP instance number 3, our priority is 8192. Okay, so when we do a display STP brief, alright, as you can see from here, so since you're number 3 here, you are the worst priority, so you can see that you are having a discarding. Now by doing so, we have achieved certain load balancing, and please remember that for you to configure this, your region configuration is very important. Alright, so please take note about your region name. If you have a region level, you have configure it, or else default is 0. Now you also can do a display STP region configuration digest. Now what's the purpose of this? This is to make sure that when we combine the region name and region number, you should get the digest hashing. Okay, now if we just look into this number, this is the number including the mapping, and this number is in 8 byte. Alright, so if let's say we go into the switch number 3, these digests are supposed to be the same. So let's do a display STP region configuration digest. Alright, so if you can compare here, switch number 3 and switch number 4 is exactly identical, because if it's not identical, then they belong to different region. Alright, so here I concluded this configuration on MSTP. So let's look into the slide then. Alright, so we have done the configuration. Now let's look into some of the troubleshooting. Now for the STP troubleshooting, especially MSTP, alright, so some of these recommendation, check the status of MSTP enable. So please always do a display STP brief or display STP. Alright, now if you do use STP, there are certain checklists that you need to check. Alright, so to see that whether your BBDU filter has enabled on any of the port. Alright, so this one's supposed to be enabled on the H port and not the trunk port. and check whether the port connected to terminal is H port so that they don't generate the topology change, and check whether the port joined to the correct VLAN. Okay, so these are some of the precautions that you need to check. Next, we have to check that MSTP calculation was performed. Okay, and check whether your topology change has increased. If let's say it's increased drastically, that means that something must have wrong. All right, or maybe there is a port that are flapping. Then next we have to check MSTP enable port between up and down. That's a flapping part. If you do have a flapping, do a display your log to query, is it due to the MSTP? And finally, make sure that the convergence is normal, right? So that is a bit of the troubleshooting, and here we look into overall here. So for the exam on the STP, I would recommend that you focus on the MSTP for your configuration. Now you need to have a very solid understanding on all these STP, RSTP, and MSTP. Alright, so even though some of these have a lot of theory and the practical in the configuration is not much, please remember that HCIE require you to understand the theory as well as the practical, as well as practice on the protection command like the BBDO filter, the root protection, the loop protection. All these you need to know very well. So understand on all these protocol, STP, RSTP, MSTP, the practical and as well as the principle. Headaches is your friend. Always get the latest version of the headaches. Okay, so that's about it, and thank you everyone, and you have a good day.
Thanks for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel.